The first sound Ambassador Kelrith made when he entered the council chamber was not a greeting. It was a sigh. Not the tired kind. Not even the annoyed kind. It was the kind of sigh someone makes when they walk into a room they already consider beneath them. The chamber noticed. 43 species occupied the circular tiers of Veraxis Station, each seated in their assigned arc, each illuminated by soft overhead bands calibrated to their atmospheric preferences. The air shimmered faintly where environmental fields overlapped, thin distortions of temperature, pressure, and chemistry layered together into something that only barely counted as shared space. At the center platform stood Kelrith. Tall even by Corthan standards, his frame encased in segmented alloy that shifted color with the chamber lighting, his crest angled slightly backward in a posture that most species had learned to interpret as restrained impatience. He looked around slowly. Not studying. Assessing. Then finally he spoke. "We will not take much of your time." The translation grid rendered his voice evenly across all frequencies, but it could not flatten the tone beneath it. Confidence did not translate. Neither did contempt. Those carried through without assistance. "We have completed our expansion analysis for this sector," Kelrith continued. "There are 12 systems of interest. 3 have already been claimed." A ripple of quiet data sharing passed between delegates. No one interrupted. Kelrith gestured once. A projection unfolded above the central floor, a rotating cluster of star systems, marked in cold geometric overlays. Several were already tagged in Corthan Dominion colors. "We will be claiming 4 more. Not requesting. Not proposing. Claiming." He let that settle. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "One of them contains a minor civilization designated Sol 3. The projection shifted. A small yellow star. A third orbiting planet highlighted in pale blue. Several delegates glanced at their consoles. A few searched records. Most already knew the classification. Developing. Recently space-capable. Limited external presence. No known alliances. No recorded military engagements outside its own system. By every measurable standard, irrelevant." Kelrith didn't look at the projection again. He didn't need to. "The planet is resource-adjacent," he said. "Positionally useful. Its inhabitants have achieved faster-than-light capability within the last century, but they have not demonstrated strategic awareness beyond their immediate system." He paused, just long enough to imply consideration. "They will be given the standard directive." A few delegates shifted in their seats. Not in protest, never that, but in the small, almost reflexive adjustment that came when a process everyone understood was about to unfold again. Standard directive. Surrender governance. Transfer orbital control. Accept integration. Or be removed. Kelrith's gaze moved across the chamber, not seeking approval, measuring reaction. "You are being informed as a matter of procedural courtesy," he said. "The operation will begin within the cycle." Silence followed. Not shocked silence. Routine silence. This was not new. The Corthan had been expanding for decades, system by system, always with the same efficiency, the same inevitability. There were protests sometimes. Formal objections. Trade concerns. None of them had ever changed an outcome. At the lower tier, a junior observer adjusted her data pad. Lisa Thurin, third-order analyst, recently assigned to the council as part of a rotational oversight program, had been told that most sessions would be administrative. Predictable. Measured. This was not dull. She zoomed in on the projection of Sol 3. The data populated quickly. Atmosphere, nitrogen-oxygen. Population, fragmented, multi-state governance. Technological index, rising, but inconsistent. Military, localized, non-unified. Fleet presence, minimal, primarily exploratory. She frowned slightly. There was nothing unusual in the numbers. Nothing at all. Which, for reasons she could not immediately explain, felt wrong. Above her, a delegate from the Irith Collective leaned toward his counterpart and transmitted a brief private query. Across the chamber, 2 Valen representatives exchanged a glance before returning their attention to the central floor. No one spoke. No one objected. Kelrith allowed the silence to extend a moment longer, then inclined his head slightly, as if acknowledging a formality that had already served its purpose. "Unless there are procedural concerns," he said, "we will consider this matter concluded." It was almost polite. Almost. Lisa's eyes flicked once more to the small blue planet turning slowly in the projection field. Sol 3. Earth, the human designation. She scanned the summary again. Unstable. Unremarkable. Her fingers hovered briefly over her pad. Then she made a note. Designation appears standard. Reaction in chamber does not. She did not know why she wrote it. Only that she didn't like the way the room felt. On the central floor, Kelrith turned slightly, preparing to step down. For a moment, it seemed the session would move on like any other. Routine. Orderly. Forgotten. But something, small, almost imperceptible, shifted in the upper tiers. And though Lisa did not yet know what it meant, she felt it before she saw it. Like the air changing before a storm no one had announced. It did not happen immediately. That was what made it noticeable. In most sessions, if someone intended to speak, they did so quickly, before momentum carried the chamber forward into the next matter. The council moved like a current. If you did not step into it at the right moment, it passed you by. Kelrith had already turned. The projection above the central floor began to fade. A procedural shift was seconds away. Then a voice spoke. "Leave that world alone." It was not loud. It did not need to be. The chamber stilled, not all at once, but in layers. Conversations that had not yet begun never started. Delegates who had already turned away paused, then slowly reoriented. Even the environmental hum, the overlapping systems that kept 43 species breathing, seemed, for a fraction of a moment, to recede. Lisa looked up. The voice had come from the upper tier, near the rear arc where the oldest member species maintained their positions. It was a section of the chamber most delegates rarely looked toward directly, not out of disrespect, but because attention there was deliberate, measured. A figure stood. Slowly. He did not rise with the fluid ease of younger species. There was weight in the motion, time in it. His form was slight, his frame narrow, his skin pale and faintly textured like aged stone. The light above him dimmed slightly, adjusting to parameters long outdated by most modern biological standards. Avoran. Lisa had seen him only twice before. He almost never spoke. He almost never stood. The chamber did not react to him with fear. But it did not treat him like anyone else. Kelrith turned back. This time he did study. "Repeat that," he said. Not angrily. Curiously. Avoran's gaze did not shift. It moved across the chamber once. Not to Kelrith, but to the others. As if the words were not meant for the one who needed to hear them most. Then he said it again. "Leave that world alone." 4 words. No elaboration. No justification. No raised tone. He sat down. That was all. The silence that followed was different from before. Not procedural. Not routine. Uncomfortable. Kelritha's crest tilted slightly forward. An angle that, among his species, signaled attention sharpened into something closer to irritation. "Is this a formal objection?" he asked. Avoran did not respond. He did not look at Kelrith again. For a moment, the chamber waited, as if expecting something else. An explanation. A precedent. A historical reference. Nothing came. Kelrith let out a short breath through his nasal vents. Not quite a laugh this time, but close enough to carry the same meaning. "You offer a directive without basis," he said. "From a species that holds no territory in this sector, maintains no fleet presence, and has not engaged in active council policy in," he paused, consulting nothing. Several cycles. Still no response. That, more than the words, seemed to decide it. Kelrith inclined his head once, dismissive, controlled. "Noted," he said. The translation grid rendered the word neutrally. It was not neutral. He turned away again. "This matter proceeds as scheduled." The projection above the chamber flickered back to life, shifting toward the next agenda item. Around the tiers, delegates resumed movement. Not fully, not comfortably, but enough to signal continuation. The current had resumed, only slightly disturbed. At the lower tier, Lisa did not move. Her eyes were fixed on Avorin. He had not changed position after sitting. His hands rested flat against the surface before him, long fingers splayed slightly against the material. Then, just for a moment, his hand shifted. Lifted. Pressed again. A small motion. Repetitive. Controlled. And completely at odds with everything she had been told about him. Lisa lowered her gaze to her data pad and added a second note beneath the first. Avorin issued direct warning. No explanation given. Physical indicators suggest suppressed stress response. She hesitated. Then added one more line. Warning not directed at Corthan alone. Addressed to entire chamber. She stared at the words for a long second. On the central floor, the session moved forward. Trade allocations. Boundary adjustments. Minor disputes. Normal things. But the room no longer felt normal. Lisa glanced once more at the fading projection of Sol 3 before it disappeared completely. Unremarkable. Insignificant. Not worth this. And yet, the oldest voice in the chamber had broken silence for it. And no one had asked why. The session ended the way all sessions did. Gradually. Not with a conclusion, but with a thinning. Delegates rose in staggered intervals. Some lingered in quiet clusters, exchanging controlled words beneath privacy fields. Others departed immediately, their responsibilities pulling them back into the deeper machinery of their respective governments. Within minutes, the central floor was empty. Within 10, the upper tiers had begun to clear. Lisa remained seated. She did not realize at first that she was one of the last still in place. Her data pad rested in her hands, its surface dimmed to a soft glow, her notes hovering in front of her like something unfinished. Designation appears standard. Reaction in chamber does not. Avorin issued direct warning. No explanation given. Warning not directed at Corthan alone. She read the lines again. They felt incomplete. Not wrong. Just insufficient. Around her, maintenance drones moved quietly between rows, recalibrating environmental nodes, resetting projection grids, clearing residual data signatures from the chamber's shared systems. Routine. Everything about this place was designed to return to routine. Lisa didn't like that. Her gaze drifted upward. Avorin had not moved immediately after the session ended. While others had risen, turned, and left, he had remained seated for several moments longer than expected. She had noticed that. She had also noticed what came after. He had stood again. Slowly. Not because he needed to. Because something in him was reluctant to move. That had been the impression. Now, his position was empty. Lisa frowned slightly. She replayed the chamber logs, not the official record, but her own observational capture. A secondary layer she maintained for behavioral analysis training. It ran in the background of every session, cataloging posture shifts, micro-movements, attention vectors. She isolated Avorin. The playback expanded. At the moment after he spoke, his hands. She slowed the frame rate. Pressed flat against the desk. Lifted. Pressed again. Not random. Not idle. Measured. Repetitive. A containment pattern. Her brow tightened. That wasn't normal. Not for him. Not for anyone who had lived long enough to control every visible reaction. She pulled up his profile. Avorin, Sulan species. Council tenure, 9,800 years, approximate. Speech frequency, minimal. Recorded deviations from baseline composure. None. None. Until now. Lisa leaned back slightly, her eyes narrowing as she stared at the data. Then she switched focus. So 3, she said quietly. The system responded instantly, expanding the file. Human designation, Earth. A rotating planetary model appeared above her pad. Blue oceans. White atmospheric bands. Green landmasses broken into irregular continental formations. Not physically. Contextually. Like something that existed on the edge of importance rather than at its center. She began reading. Technological development, rapid, uneven. Political structure, fragmented. Conflict history, internal, frequent, unresolved. External behavior, limited, non-aggressive. Council interaction, 2 minor diplomatic attempts, both unremarkable. Lisa exhaled slowly. There it was again. Nothing. Nothing unusual. Nothing threatening. Nothing that justified. She stopped. Read again. Then opened a secondary panel and began cross-referencing. Trade exposure, negligible. Territorial claims, none beyond local system. Alliance network, non-existent. Fleet registry, minimal, exploratory class vessels only. Her fingers hovered. Then she leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing. If this is accurate, she murmured. She didn't finish the thought. Because it led somewhere she didn't like. She minimized the data and brought Avoran's profile back up. Then split the screen. On one side, a species with no measurable strategic value. On the other, one of the oldest beings in the chamber issuing a direct warning with visible signs of stress. The mismatch was absolute. Lisa tapped her pad once, opening a fresh note. She hesitated. Then began writing. Discrepancy analysis. Observed. Target classified as low-priority developing civilization. No significant military or political indicators. Contradictory input. Sulan delegate, Avoran, issues direct warning. Behavioral deviation indicates suppressed stress response. Warning delivered publicly, without procedural framing. She paused. Then added. Conclusion, preliminary. Available data set is incomplete. She stared at that line. Incomplete. That was the only explanation that fit. Not wrong. Not misleading. Just missing something. Something large enough that Avoran, who had not spoken in 3 sessions, had chosen to break silence for it. Lisa stood. The movement surprised her. She hadn't planned to. But sitting there, staring at incomplete data, suddenly felt like the wrong response. She needed more. Across the chamber, the last of the staff units moved toward the exits. The overhead lighting dimmed incrementally as the system shifted to low-activity mode. Lisa stepped down from her tier and moved toward the central floor. The space felt different when it was empty. Larger. Less structured. The projection systems were offline now, leaving the center bare, just smooth flooring and faint seams where the display grids would activate again during the next session. She stopped where Kelrith had stood. Looked up. 43 arcs of seating rising above her. She turned slightly. Found the upper tier. Avoran's position. From here, it looked farther away than it had from her seat. More distant. More removed. She didn't like that either. Her pad chimed softly. A reminder. Scheduled briefing in 12 minutes. She dismissed it. Then, after a brief pause, she accessed the station network. Query, she said. Deep Archive Access Protocols for Restricted Historical Records Related to Sol 3. There was a delay. Longer than usual. Then the system responded. Access level insufficient. Lisa didn't react immediately. She had expected that. So, submit preliminary research request, she said. Category, Developmental Anomaly Assessment. Another pause. Request logged. Processing time, indeterminate. Indeterminate. That was not a standard response. Lisa's grip tightened slightly on the edge of her pad. She closed the interface. For a moment, she stood there in the center of the empty chamber, surrounded by silence that no longer felt procedural. Felt weighted, like something had been said that the room itself had not yet processed. She looked up one last time toward the upper tier. Toward the place where Avoran had stood. Then she turned and began walking toward the exit. Her pace was measured, controlled. But her thoughts were not. Because now there was a new question. Not just, why did Avoran warn them? But, what is missing from the record, and who removed it? The Korthan fleet departed 8 days later. There was no ceremony. No announcement beyond the formal notice already logged in the Council archives. No attempt to justify the action. No effort to frame it as defensive or necessary. It was simply executed. 21 warships. 2 command vessels. Support craft in standard formation. Enough firepower to reduce a planetary surface to compliance within a single rotation cycle. The departure was visible from Verax's station through the long-range relay feeds, thin lines of distortion as each vessel entered faster-than-light transition, slipping out of real space one after another until the system was empty again. Several delegates watched. Most did not. For the majority of the chamber, this was routine. Another expansion. Another integration. Another minor civilization about to be absorbed into a larger structure it could not resist. Lisa watched the entire sequence. She did not speak. She did not take notes. She simply observed. When the final vessel vanished from the feed, she remained there a moment longer, staring at the empty coordinates where they had been. Then she closed the display. Across the station, life continued. Trade negotiations resumed. Boundary disputes resurfaced. Policy committees met in quiet rooms where decisions were shaped long before they reached the public chamber. Nothing changed. Except Lisa began to notice something. Not in what people were saying. In what they weren't. The mention of Sol, 3, Earth, began to disappear. Not officially. There were still records. Still references in procedural logs. Still visible in the expansion registry. But in conversation, it was avoided. Delegates who would normally debate territorial implications said nothing. Species that tracked expansion patterns for strategic forecasting did not request updated projections. Even the Irith Collective, who rarely ignored any shift in regional power balance, had not filed a single inquiry. Lisa twice. No inquiries. No objections. No concerns. It was as if the system had already been processed. Filed. She didn't believe that. She returned to her quarters and reopened the Sol 3 file. And again. Nothing changed. Same data. Same classifications. Same absence of anything that justified. She stopped. Closed her eyes briefly. Then opened a new window. Corthan's strategic doctrine. It loaded instantly. Predictable. Efficient. Direct. They favored overwhelming force, rapid compliance, minimal prolonged engagement. Their approach vectors were standardized. Their entry points optimized for maximum positional advantage relative to target gravity wells and defensive capacity. She pulled up the nearest simulations. Ran 3 models. All produced the same outcome. Corthan victory within acceptable operational loss margins. No surprises. No complications. Nothing. Her eyes opened. Slowly. She stared at the simulation output. Then at the Sol 3 file. Then back at the simulation. No, she said quietly. She adjusted parameters. Not Corthan. Human. She built the model from available data. Limited. Fragmented. Incomplete. She knew it would be inaccurate. So, she ran it. The system processed. Calculated. Adjusted. Then displayed the result. Outcome, indeterminate. Lisa frowned. She ran it again. Different parameters. Different assumptions. Same result. Outcome, indeterminate. That was not possible. Even incomplete data sets produce directional outcomes. Victory. Plus. Stalemate. Something. No. She leaned closer. Explain, she said. The system responded. Insufficient behavioral modeling data. Predictive variance exceeds threshold. Her pulse slowed slightly. Not faster. Slower. That feeling again. Cold. Settling. She closed the simulation. Sat back. And for a moment, did nothing. Across the station, Avoran did not appear. He missed the next session. And the one after that. His aide filed the standard notice. Indisposed, temporary absence. No one questioned it. No one requested clarification. Lisa did. Privately. The response came hours later. Medical status, stable. No additional details authorized. She stared at the message longer than she should have. Then deleted it. The fleet traveled for 61 days. During those 61 days, nothing happened. No human message reached the council. No request for arbitration. No protest. No signal of any kind. No attempt to contact neighboring systems for assistance. Nothing. Lisa monitored the relay networks. Every day. She wasn't assigned to. She wasn't required to. But she did. She filtered civilian channels, diplomatic frequencies, open broadcast bands, silence, absolute. It wasn't just the absence of communication. It was the absence of reaction. She remembered her training. When a developing civilization faced external threat, the pattern was consistent. They broadcast. They appealed. They escalated visibility. Because visibility created pressure. And pressure created protection. That was how small civilizations survived. Earth did none of that. On day 12, Lisa began checking deeper channels. On day 23, she expanded her filters. On day 40, she started reviewing raw signal noise for anomalies. On day 51, she stopped telling herself she was overreacting. Because by then, the silence no longer felt like an action. On day 61, the relay feed updated. Corthan Fleet, arrival at Sol 3 system confirmed. Lisa did not breathe for a moment. The data streamed in. Entry point coordinates. Formation alignment. Standard approach pattern. Everything exactly as predicted. Exactly as expected. Exactly. Her hand tightened slightly around the edge of her console. Too clean, she whispered. The feed stabilized. Deep space. Distant star. A small blue world, barely visible against the light. The Corthan fleet held position at the edge of the system. Then, as protocol dictated, they broadcast. Surrender directive. 72-hour compliance window. The message propagated across all known frequencies. Structured. Unavoidable. Lisa leaned forward slightly. Waiting. Not for the Corthan. For the response. Seconds passed. Then minutes. 11 minutes. And nothing happened. No reply. No transmission. No movement from the planet. Silence. Lisa felt it then. Not confusion. Not uncertainty. Something sharper. Recognition. She didn't know what she was recognizing yet. Only that she had felt this pattern building for days. Weeks. 61 days of it. And now it had reached its edge. She stared at the feed. At the empty space around the Corthan formation. At the stillness. At the absence of anything that should have been there. And for the first time since this had begun, she stopped wondering if Earth was unprepared, and started wondering how long they had been waiting. First, nothing happened. The Corthan fleet held position just beyond the outer boundary of the Sol system, engines stabilized, weapons systems charged but idle, formation locked into optimal engagement geometry. Commander Velker stood at the center of his command vessel, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the forward display. He had executed this sequence before. Different worlds. Different species. Same result. The surrender directive had been broadcast. The countdown had begun. 72 hours. More than enough time for a developing civilization to panic. To argue. To fracture internally. To respond. They always responded. Behind him, his tactical officers monitored incoming channels. Any reply? Velker asked. No, Commander. He nodded once. Expected. There was always a delay. Confusion. Internal debate. A message. A plea. A demand for clarification. Something. Velker allowed himself a small breath. Routine. He turned slightly, preparing to issue secondary positioning adjustments. Commander. The tone changed. Not alarm. Not yet. But different. Velker didn't turn immediately. What is it? His sensor officer hesitated. That was the first irregularity. Multiple signal activations detected, she said. Source. Distributed. Velker turned. Clarify. The forward display shifted. The Sol system expanded outward. Points appeared. Dozens. Hundreds. Faint. Positioned across the outer system in a lattice that had not been visible moments before. Velker's crest lowered slightly. Probes? He asked. Yes, Commander. Classification? Another pause. Unknown. That word did not belong in his command deck. Velker stepped forward. Enhance. The image sharpened. The probes were small, almost negligible in size. Minimal energy signatures. Positioned at varying distances, angles, and orbital paths. At first glance, they looked like debris. At second glance, they formed a pattern. Velker felt something shift in his chest. Not fear. Not yet. Recognition of complexity. When were these deployed? He asked. The sensor officer's hands moved rapidly across her interface. I don't know. Velker's gaze snapped to her. You don't know. No recorded deployment events. No insertion signatures. No. She stopped. Because the answer was becoming obvious. They were already here, she finished quietly. Velker said nothing. Behind him, the tactical display updated again. Projected approach vectors appeared, Corthan standard entry paths mapped against the system. Every single one intersected the probe lattice. Precisely. Exactly. Velker's voice dropped. Run predictive analysis. The system complied. Within seconds, it generated the result. Conclusion: probe network optimized for current fleet position. Silence spread across the command deck. Velker stared at the display. Optimized. For them. For this exact entry point. For a position that had been finalized. After departure, he felt the first edge of something unfamiliar press against his thoughts. Impossible, one of the officers whispered. Velker ignored it. Continue, he said. The probes activated. All of them. At once. The system lit up. Not with weapons fire. Not with shields. With data. A surge of signals flooded the Corthan sensors. Scanning, mapping, measuring. Every ship, every emission, every micro-adjustment in their formation captured and processed in real time. Velker's tactical display began to flicker. Stabilize, he ordered. We're trying, the systems officer replied. She stopped. They're updating faster than we can model. Velker's eyes narrowed. Something appeared. 3 new signatures. 3 groups. Emerging from 3 different vectors. Contact, the sensor officer said, voice tight now. Identify. The display expanded again. Ships. Human ships. 40 of them. Not large. Not heavily armored. Not arranged in any recognizable formation. Velker felt a flicker of irritation. Disorganized, he said. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. Because the movement didn't resolve. The ships shifted continuously, altering position in ways that refused to stabilize into a pattern. Every time the system attempted to map their trajectory, it recalculated. Then recalculated again. They're not holding formation, the tactical officer said. No, Velker replied slowly. They are. The officer turned toward him. Velker didn't explain. Because he couldn't. Not yet. The human ships closed distance. No broadcast preceded them. No demand. No warning. Velker's crest rose slightly. Open channel, he ordered. The system complied. Unidentified vessels, Velker said, voice-controlled, authoritative. You are in violation of Corthan directive. Cease approach and... The channel filled with static. Not interference. Not noise. Something structured. It cut. Cleanly. Velker's jaw tightened. Lock weapons, he said. The command propagated instantly. Corthan targeting systems aligned. Firing solutions calculated. Every human ship fell within engagement parameters. Fire. The first volley launched. Coherent beams crossed the void. And missed. Not because of distance. Not because of speed. Because the targets were no longer where they had been. Velker's eyes sharpened. Recalculate. We are, the tactical officer said, voice rising slightly. She stopped. They're moving inside the prediction window. That was not possible. Prediction windows existed because physics existed. Velker stepped forward. Fire again. Second volley. Closer. More accurate. So, not enough. The human ships folded. Not retreating. Not advancing. Shifting. Angles that required Corthan vessels to adjust firing arcs. Through their own formation. Hold fire, Velker snapped. Too late. One of the outer ships fired and struck a friendly vessel. A flash of light. Hull breach. Cease. Velker barked. Weapons fell silent. For a fraction of a second, everything stopped. But the humans began. It was not a single attack. It was a sequence. Precise. Layered. Relentless. Strikes came from angles Velker's systems flagged as low probability. Then impossible. But undefined. His first ship went dark 38 minutes into the engagement. No explosion. No dramatic failure. But gone. Systems offline. Drifting. Velker's mind adjusted. Reform defensive grid, he ordered. Fallback positions. Commander, the sensor officer said. Velker didn't look away from the display. What? They're not targeting us. That made no sense. They are disabling. Velker's breath slowed. He watched. And realized. It was true. The human ships were not prioritizing destruction. They were prioritizing control. Movement restriction. System disruption. Isolation. They were dismantling the fleet. Piece by piece. Velker felt something new then. Not fear. Not panic. Something colder. Understanding. By the second hour, he had lost 6 ships. By the third, he stopped trying to win. Because there was no model left that led to victory. There was only one question remaining. How? He said quietly. No one answered. Because no one knew. On the far edge of the system, beyond the immediate engagement zone, the probe network continued to adjust. Watching. Updating. Learning. Every movement. Every decision. Every attempt to adapt. Captured. Countered. Velker stared at the display as another ship went dark. 40 human vessels. 0 losses. 23 Korthan ships. Falling. One by one. And in that moment, for the first time since entering the system, Velker understood something fundamental. This was not a battle. This was a response. And it had been prepared long before he arrived. By the 4th hour, the formation no longer existed. What had begun as a clean, disciplined Korthan advance had dissolved into fragments, isolated vessels drifting in disrupted vectors, their coordination stripped away piece by piece. Commander Velker stood in silence, not issuing orders, not because there was nothing left to command, but because every command he gave arrived too late. Or worse, was already anticipated. Status, he said quietly. No one answered immediately. 4 operational ships remaining, the tactical officer said. Her voice was steady, but thinner than before. Velker didn't react. He already knew. He could see it. The display had simplified itself, automatically filtering out disabled vessels, lost signals, drifting debris. What remained was sparse, insufficient, irrelevant. Another alert flashed. One of the remaining ships blinked, flickered, went dark. 3. Velker exhaled slowly. Why are we still alive? Someone asked. No one responded. Because the question was not tactical. It was conceptual. Velker watched the human ships. They had not changed. Not in structure. Not in pattern. They moved the same way they had from the beginning. Fluid, unreadable, constantly shifting just outside the edge of prediction. Not faster. Not stronger. Ahead. Always ahead. He brought up the engagement timeline. 4 hours, 12 minutes. Every loss. Every movement. Every failed adaptation. He replayed a sequence. Replayed it again. Then another. And another. His eyes narrowed. They're not reacting to us, he said. The words came slowly. Measured. The tactical officer looked at him. What? Velker didn't look away from the display. They're not reacting, he repeated. They're executing. Silence followed. Because everyone understood what that meant. Reaction implied uncertainty. Execution implied plan. Velker's gaze shifted slightly. To the probe network. Still active. Still adjusting. Still feeding data into the system. They knew, he said. No one asked what he meant. They knew where we would arrive. Another ship flickered. Systems failing. Engines stalling. Weapons offline. Velker watched it go. They knew how we would move. The command deck was very quiet now. They knew how we would fight. He paused. And for the first time, there was something like clarity in his voice. This was decided before we entered the system. The final operational ship beside them took a hit. Not catastrophic. Not explosive. Precise. Its weapons shut down. Then its engines. Then its signal faded to emergency bandwidth. 2 ships. Velker stood still. He could feel it now. Not fear. Not panic. Something worse. Finality. There was no reversal left. No hidden maneuver. No unexpected advantage waiting to be deployed. This was not a moment that could be recovered. It was a moment that had already been concluded, and he was only now reaching the end of it. "Commander," the communications officer said quietly. Velker turned his head slightly. "Yes. There is a transmission." Velker's eyes sharpened. "From Earth?" "No." The pause. "From our disabled vessels." Velker frowned. "Clarify." "They are receiving data." "From where?" The officer hesitated. "All vectors." Velker turned fully now. "Display." The screen shifted. Streams of information appeared, flowing into every surviving Korthan ship, including his own. Sensor logs. Tactical recordings. Movement analysis. Every moment of the engagement. Every angle. Every decision point. Compiled. Ordered. Complete. Velker stared at it. "They're giving us the battle," someone whispered. "Not fragments. Not selected moments. Everything." Velker's mind moved quickly now. "Not to fight. To understand. They want us to see it," he said. The realization settled across the deck. Heavy. Unavoidable. They want us to know. The final ship beside them went dark. One remained. Velker's. He stood alone at the center of the system. 40 human vessels. Surrounding. Watching. Not firing. Not advancing. Waiting. Velker straightened slightly. Not out of defiance. Out of recognition. This was no longer combat. This was conclusion. He looked at the data still streaming across his display. Every mistake. Every failed adjustment. Every moment where he had believed he still had control. Laid out. Perfectly. He let out a slow breath. Then spoke. "Transmit acknowledgement." The communications officer hesitated. "Commander?" "Do it." The pause. "Channel open." Velker looked at the empty space ahead of him. At the ships that had dismantled his fleet without losing a single one. At the system that had been waiting. And he said, "Acknowledged." No reply came. None was needed. The human ships began to move. Not toward him. Away. One by one. Breaking formation, not into disorder, but into something even less readable. Within moments, they were gone. No pursuit. No final strike. No declaration of victory. Absence. Velker stood in silence. His ship drifted. Systems damaged. Fleet destroyed. Mission failed. And yet, he was alive. They had allowed that. He understood why. He looked once more at the complete record of the engagement. At the precision. The control. The inevitability. Then he closed his eyes briefly. Not in defeat. In comprehension. When he opened them again, his voice was steady. Set course for return. No one spoke. Because there was nothing left to say. Behind them, the Sol system returned to stillness. As if nothing had happened. As if it had always been this way. The relay feed cut out for 4 seconds. Not long enough to suggest failure. Just long enough to feel deliberate. When it returned, the Sol system was quiet. No fleet. No human ships. No movement beyond drifting debris and disabled vessels slowly stabilizing under emergency protocols. The chamber on Verax's station was silent. Not procedurally. Not temporarily. Completely. No one spoke. No one moved. The projection hovered above the central floor, displaying the final state of the engagement, cold, precise, undeniable. 23 Korthan vessels. Neutralized. 0 confirmed human losses. The data updated once more. Then stopped. Across the tiers, delegates remained still. For a long moment, no one seemed willing to be the first to react. A voice. So, barely above a whisper. How long were they watching? It came from the mid-tier. No one answered. Because no one knew. But the question did something important. It shifted the focus. From what had happened, to how long it had been inevitable. At the lower tier, Lisa didn't look away from the projection. Her eyes moved across the data. Probe network. Engagement vectors. Timing. She opened a secondary panel. Overlaid the fleet's departure from Corthan space. Then the estimated travel path. She stopped. Her breath slowed. No, she whispered. She adjusted the timeline. Ran the calculation again. Then again. The result did not change. She spoke without realizing it. They tracked them. A nearby delegate turned slightly. What? Lisa didn't look at him. They tracked the fleet from departure, she said, voice steady now. From the moment they left Corthan space. The delegate frowned. That's not possible. Lisa's eyes remained fixed on the data. It is if you're not waiting for them to arrive, she said quietly. Silence spread again. Different this time. Sharper. Because now, there was a beginning. Not just an end. 61 days. That number settled into the room like weight. 61 days of silence. Not ignorance. Not delay. Observation. Preparation. Across the upper tier, a figure stood. The movement was slow. Deliberate. Recognized. Avoran. He had not attended the previous sessions. His absence had gone unremarked. His return did not. The chamber shifted. Not visibly, but in attention. Focus. Every delegate who understood what he represented. Avoran did not descend to the central floor. He did not need to. He stood where he was. High above. Removed. And spoke. You are surprised, he said. It was not a question. His voice carried across the chamber without effort. The translation grid adjusted automatically. No one responded. Avoran looked out over the assembled delegates. Not at the Corthan representatives. Not at any single species. At all of them. You should not be. The words landed heavily. A Corthan envoy, seated 3 tiers below, rose halfway from his position. You knew, he said. It was not an accusation. Not entirely. Avoran's gaze shifted slightly. Toward him. I warned you. The envoy's posture tightened. You did not explain. Avoran's expression did not change. No, he said. I did not. The pause. Because explanation does not change outcome. The chamber absorbed that. Slowly. Uneasily. Another delegate, older, from a species known for long memory and careful speech, leaned forward. You have encountered them before, she said. Avoran did not answer immediately. The delay mattered. It stretched just long enough to confirm what no one wanted confirmed. Yes, he said. The word echoed. Not loudly, but completely. Lisa felt it more than heard it. Yes. Not speculation. Not theory. Fact. The delegate continued. How long? Avoran's gaze drifted slightly. Not searching. Remembering. A long time, he said. That was not an answer. Everyone knew it. But no one interrupted. Because they understood. He would continue. When he chose to. We have observed that world, Avoran said slowly, for over 40,000 of your standard years. A ripple passed through the chamber. Not shock. Something quieter. Heavier. 40,000. Before most current civilizations had even reached space. Before many had existed at all. Lisa's fingers tightened slightly around her pad. Avoran continued. Not as you observe, he said. Not for trade. Not for territory. Not for integration. His pale eyes moved across the room. We observed them because we made a mistake. The word landed harder than expected. Mistake. From him. From a species like his. That word carried weight. What mistake? Someone asked. Avoran did not look toward the voice. We made contact. Silence. Absolute. Brief, he added. Unintended. We believed it went unnoticed. He paused. But we were wrong. Lisa felt something shift in her chest. The chamber leaned in. Without moving. What happened? The same voice asked. Avoran's hands rested lightly in front of him. So, composed. They responded, he said. The word felt insufficient. Deliberately so. How? Another delegate asked. Avoran's gaze sharpened slightly. Not with weapons, he said. Not with hostility. The pause. They sent us a message. Lisa's breath slowed. What kind of message? Avoran did not look away. A complete analysis of our vessel, he said. Murmurs. Quiet. Controlled. But present. They recorded our approach vector, he continued. Our signal patterns. Our material composition. The particulate residue on our hull. He let that settle. They sent us the coordinates of our home system. The chamber froze. Not metaphorically. Physically. Movement stopped. Sound stopped. Lisa stared upward. Her mind trying to process something it did not have the structure for. How? Someone began. Without faster-than-light capability, Avoran said. Without external contact. Without knowledge of us beyond what they could observe. He paused. They looked at what we were. Another pause. And they found us. The silence that followed was different from any before it. It was not confusion. It was recalibration. Across the chamber, something fundamental shifted. The Korthan envoy sat slowly. Not defeated. Not humiliated. Quiet. Lisa felt it too. That same cold clarity she had felt building for days. Weeks. Given shape. Avoran's voice softened slightly. They did not threaten us, he said. They did not demand anything. His eyes moved across the chamber once more. They demonstrated. He let the words sit. Unchallenged. Unexplained. Unavoidable. We withdrew, he continued. Completely. Immediately. A long pause. And we have not interfered since. 40,000 years. Lisa's mind tried to hold that. Tried again. Failed again. Because the implication was too large. This wasn't new. This wasn't sudden. Had always been true. Avoran looked at them all. Every species. Every delegate. Every mind now forced to reconsider what they thought they understood. You saw what happened today, he said. Not a question. A statement. You believe you have learned something. A slight shift in his tone. Not warning. Not quite. You have not. The chamber held its breath. Today, Avoran said, you saw the result. His gaze hardened, just slightly. Not the cause. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. He sat. And did not speak again. Lisa did not go back to her quarters. Not immediately. When the chamber session dissolved, slowly, unevenly, with delegates leaving in silence rather than conversation, she remained where she was for several minutes. Then she stood and walked. Not toward her assigned sector. Toward the lower transit corridors. Toward the archive levels. She didn't request permission this time. She had already done that. And the answer had been insufficient access. So she changed the question. The archive entrance was 3 levels below the main ring. The lighting was different there. Dimmer. Warmer. Less optimized for shared biology and more suited for preservation. Old systems. Old records. Old decisions. An elderly Marin archivist stood at the entry node, pale eyes reflecting the soft amber glow of the corridor. He looked up as Lisa approached. Said nothing. She stopped in front of him. I'm submitting a revised research request, she said. Her voice was calm. Measured. I'm conducting a study on pre-membership civilizational development anomalies. I require access to records classified under unresolved contact events. The archivist watched her for a moment, then extended a thin interface panel. Scope. Historical, she said. Minimum threshold, 15,000 years. The pause. Access will be limited, he said. I understand. No copies. I understand. Full documents require manual unlock. I understand. Another pause. Longer this time. Then the archivist stepped aside. Proceed. The archive room was quiet. Not silent. Alive in a different way. Data cores stacked in long vertical columns, their surfaces etched with identifiers in scripts older than most living species could read without translation. Lisa moved to a terminal at the far end. Activated it. The system responded slowly. Not inefficient. Deliberate. Search query, she said. Sol 3. Earth designation. All historical records. The system processed. Then returned. 31 results. Across a span of 38,000 years. Lisa's breath caught slightly. 31. Not one. Not recent. Repeated. She selected the first. Summary only. A short entry appeared. Survey notation. Classification update. No anomaly recorded. She scrolled. Second. The fourth. Most were like that. Routine. Bureaucratic. Unremarkable. She saw it. A symbol. Next to one of the entries. 2 concentric circles. A line through them. She frowned. Selected it. The system paused. Then displayed a classification index. Marker definition. Resolved conflict event. Lisa's pulse slowed. Resolved conflict. No arbitration. No escalation. No recorded war. Resolved. She went back. Checked the list again. 1 entry. Then another. Then another. 7. 7 records marked with the same symbol. All tied to Earth. Lisa's fingers tightened slightly. She selected the first flagged entry. Request full document. The system responded. Pending unlock. Estimated time, 2 hours. She didn't move. She read the summary again. And again. And again. 2 hours passed slowly. The archive did not encourage impatience. Finally, the document unlocked. She opened it. Tavari Survey Report, 37,000 years prior. The text appeared in translation. Fragmented. Formal. Operation. Resource extraction. Asteroid cluster adjacent to Sol 3 system. Status. Discontinued. Lisa leaned forward. The key section was short. Too short. Reason. Local conditions deemed non-viable. She blinked. That was it. No conflict. No incident report. No explanation. Non-viable. She read the line again. And again. It didn't make sense. A species capable of interstellar extraction operations did not abandon a site without cause. And they documented cause. Boys. Except. Lisa requested the second document. 90 minutes. She waited. Survey entry. 41,000 years prior. Older. Partially corrupted. Sections missing. But enough remained. Contact event recorded. Her breath slowed. She read further. Investigation initiated. Signal anomaly detected. The text fractured. Recovered. Stopped. Mid-sentence. She scrolled. A second entry followed. Filed 11 days later. Different author. Original team returned to home space. Region classified as sensitive. No further action recommended. That was all. Lisa stared at the screen. No explanation. No details. No description of the anomaly. Withdrawal. She leaned back slowly. Her mind beginning to connect something. Not fully. Not yet. But pattern. She requested the third document. Then the fourth. Then the fifth. 2 days passed. She barely noticed. Each record followed the same structure. Different species. Different eras. Different intentions. Same result. They approached. Something happened. They withdrew. And the official explanation said nothing. Not war. Not defeat. Not loss. Non-viable. Sensitive. Discontinued. Words designed to close files. Not explain them. By the fourth record, Lisa stopped reading for content and started mapping structure. She wrote it down. Pattern. Approach. Undescribed event. Immediate withdrawal. Minimal documentation. Region avoidance thereafter. She stared at the pattern. Then at the list of species involved. Several no longer existed. Others had changed, absorbed, fragmented, quietly gone. Her chest tightened slightly. She selected the final record. The oldest entry, approximate 44,000 years prior. The text was difficult to translate. The script archaic, imprecise. The system struggled. Rendered. Contact event with pre-sapient world. Lisa frowned. Pre-sapient? She read on. Team returned. World added to protected observation list. 3 lines. That was all. She saw it. A margin note. Not part of the original entry. Added later. Different script. Different hand. The system translated slowly. Piece by piece. Lisa read it once. Then again. Then a third time. Because her mind resisted it. The translation finalized. They were not pre-sapient. The pause. Then the rest appeared. We were wrong. Do not go back. Lisa stood very still. The archive room felt colder, quieter, heavier. 44,000 years. And even then, someone had understood. Not fully, not clearly, but enough. Enough to leave a warning. Not in the record. In the margin. Where it would not be erased. Lisa stepped back from the terminal slowly. Her thoughts moving faster now. Connecting. Aligning. The Tavari withdrawal. The missing explanations. The Sulin signal. The probe network. The battle. The silence. All of it. One pattern. Not war. Not conquest. Something else. Something patient. She looked back at the screen. At the lines still glowing softly in the amber light. Do not go back. And for the first time, she understood what a Vorin had meant. Not the result. The cause. She turned away from the terminal. Her mind no longer asking, what are humans capable of? But something far more dangerous. What happens to those who don't understand them in time? The invitation was sent 3 days later. It was drafted carefully. Reviewed 12 times. Rewritten in sections by 7 different subcommittees. Every word weighed. Every implication considered. The council did not rush language when it no longer understood the balance of power. The final version was neutral, respectful, measured. It referred to the engagement as a significant military incident. It expressed interest in mutual understanding. It avoided words like threat, warning, or demonstration. It did not mention the destroyed fleet. It did not need to. The message was transmitted. The chamber waited. The response came 6 hours later. No delay. No negotiation. No adjustment. 3 representatives. Arrival in 12 days. No additional requests. No conditions. Lisa read the response twice. Then a third time. 12 days. Not standard. Not extended. Not rushed. Exact. Prepared in advance. She did not say that out loud. The ship arrived without announcement. No escort request. No formation signal. No diplomatic preamble. It appeared at the edge of the system, requested docking clearance, and aligned itself with Varax's station's outer ring with quiet precision. It was smaller than expected. Unremarkable. No visible weapon systems. No heavy shielding signatures. No display of force. It did not look like the vessel of a species that had dismantled a fleet in under 6 hours. That, Lisa realized, was the point. She stood with the reception detail at docking bay 3. Standard protocol. Minimal ceremony. No crowd. The airlock cycled. The door opened. 3 humans stepped out. Lisa had reviewed the basic biological file. But that did not prepare her. They looked ordinary. Not physically imposing. Not visually distinct from what the data had suggested. And yet, something in the way they moved did not match the file. The first stepped forward. A woman. Midlife by human standards. Dark-haired Tyvek. Eyes steady. Not scanning the room. Not assessing threats. Simply present. I'm Rena Soul, she said. Her voice was calm. Even. Not formal. Not informal. Certain. Lisa stepped forward. Offered her hand, recalling the cultural briefing. Rena accepted immediately. No hesitation. Her grip was firm. Controlled. "Welcome to Varaxas Station," Lisa said. Rena nodded slightly. "Thank you." Behind her stood the second human. Broader build. Expression relaxed. Observing. Not tense. Not guarded. Aware. The third stood slightly apart. Quieter. Carrying a single case. His eyes moved. Not constantly. Not nervously. But precisely. Taking in details. Noting them. Lisa felt it. That same sensation from before. Not fear. Recognition. The session was held 2 days later. The chamber was full. More than usual. Several species had sent additional observers. Others had chosen to attend in person rather than through proxy systems. No one wanted to rely on second-hand interpretation. The 3 humans stood at the center. No prepared statement. No projection. No display. Rena stood slightly forward. Bow. Lisa had learned his name, just behind her. The third remained near the edge of the platform. Watching. The session coordinator hesitated briefly. Then began. "The council welcomes the delegation from Sol 3, he said. "We appreciate your—" Rena inclined her head slightly. "We prefer direct exchange," she said. No challenge in the tone. Preference. The coordinator paused. Then nodded. "Of course." He stepped back. The floor was theirs. The first question came from the Marin Collective. "Can you clarify your current fleet capacity?" Rena did not hesitate. "No." The word landed softly. But completely. The Marin delegate blinked. "You decline to answer?" Rena's expression didn't change. "We are not in a position to share that." No apology. No deflection. The next question came quickly. "Why was this capability not disclosed during your initial council contact?" Rena looked at the speaker. "Because we were not asked." A slight ripple moved through the chamber. Not disagreement. Adjustment. The Corthan representative spoke next. Voice controlled. Tighter than before. "You monitored our fleet for 61 days, he said. Without communication." "Yes." "How long have you been tracking our expansion?" Rena considered for a moment. "Since it began affecting regions near us." The answer was simple, which made it worse. Another delegate leaned forward. "How capable is your species?" The question hung in the air. Not formally structured. Not politically softened. Direct. Rena looked at him. For a long moment. "We don't share that." Silence. The delegate frowned slightly. "Why not?" Rena's gaze remained steady. "Because when neighbors know your exact limits," she said, "they start looking for margins." She paused. "They begin calculating the conditions under which those limits might fail." No one interrupted. "We've found," she continued, "that uncertainty produces more stable behavior." A longer pause. "People tend to be more careful when they don't know where the edge is." The chamber absorbed that. Slowly, deeply. The Corthan representative spoke again. "Do you consider this matter resolved?" "Yes." "No further action?" "No." The pause. "How can you be certain we will not return?" Rena tilted her head slightly. Not dismissive. Thoughtful. "The surviving commanders," she said, "were returned with full engagement records." She let that sit. Every angle. Every decision. Every outcome. Silence. Heavy. Measured. "We believe," she finished, "that is sufficient." No one asked what would happen if it wasn't. After the session, the chamber dissolved into clusters. Private discussions. Quiet analysis. Careful recalibration of assumptions. Lisa stood at the edge of the room. Watching. The third human, the quiet one, stood near the outer wall. Still. Observing the ceiling. As if the structure itself interested him. A senior delegate approached him. Spoke quietly. Lisa couldn't hear the words. But she saw the result. The delegate's posture changed. Subtly. But unmistakably. He ended the conversation quickly. And left. Faster than he had arrived. Lisa felt that. Filed it away. Another data point. Another piece of a pattern she still couldn't fully define. Later. She found Rena alone. In the observation corridor. The same curved glass. The same endless field of stars. Rena stood with her hands lightly behind her back. Looking outward. Not searching. Not distracted. Watching. Lisa approached slowly. Stopped beside her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Lisa said, "May I ask you something?" Rena didn't look at her. "Yes." Lisa hesitated. "Do you know how you are perceived?" The pause. Then Rena turned slightly. "Somewhat," she said. Lisa looked out at the stars. "At least 7 species have records of approaching your system," she said. "And then, leaving." Rena listened. Did not interrupt. "They don't explain why," Lisa continued. "But the pattern is consistent." A longer pause. Rena's expression shifted. Not surprise. Recognition. "We've been aware of some of those interactions," she said. "Not all." Rena shook her head slightly. "No." Lisa studied her. "Does that concern you?" Rena looked back at the stars. For a moment she didn't answer. Concern isn't the right word. Another pause. "We remember," she said. The words were quiet, but they carried. "Everything we've done," she continued. "Everything that's been done to us." Lisa didn't move. "We learned from it," Rena said. Slowly. Imperfectly. Repeatedly. She turned slightly toward Lisa. "We're not harmless." The honesty in that statement was more unsettling than any threat. "But we try to be careful," Rena added, "because we know what happens when we're not." Lisa felt that. Unsettling. "Then why not warn others?" she asked. "Why not make it clear?" Rena's gaze held hers. "Because clarity invites challenge," she said. A small pause. "And challenge escalates." She looked back at the stars. "We prefer it doesn't." Silence settled between them. Not empty. Then Lisa asked the question she had been holding since the archive. "The signal," she said. 40,000 years ago." Rena didn't turn. "The coordinates." A long pause. Lisa's voice was quieter now. "Was that a threat?" Rena was still. "Completely." Very softly. "No." Another pause. Then she said, "It was an introduction." The human ship departed the next morning. No ceremony. No escort. No announcement beyond a simple departure request logged through station control. Lisa stood in the observation corridor. The same place. The same curve of glass stretching out into open space. She had arrived early. Before the corridor filled. Before the station shifted fully into its next cycle. She wanted to see it leave. Not because of protocol. It felt important. The ship drifted slowly away from the docking ring. Unremarkable. Almost easy to ignore. If you didn't know. If you hadn't seen. If you hadn't spent days pulling at threads that led back further than most civilizations could remember. Lisa watched it in silence. Behind her, the station moved. Quietly. Efficiently. As if nothing had changed. But something had. Not in structure. Not in policy. In perception. She could feel it. In the way delegates spoke more carefully. In the way certain topics were no longer dismissed so easily. In the way the word Earth had stopped meaning minor. The ship continued outward. Steady. No urgency. No display of power. Leaving. Lisa thought about the archive. The 7 records. The missing explanations. The margin note written by someone who had understood just enough to be afraid. She thought about Avoran. 40,000 years of silence. Not ignorance. Not indifference. Deliberate distance. She thought about the battle. 6 hours. An entire fleet dismantled. Not destroyed for spectacle. Not erased for dominance. Taken apart. Understood. Returned. A message. Not in words. In certainty. Then she thought about Rena. Standing beside her. Looking at the stars as if she had seen them for a very long time. "We remember." The words echoed quietly. Lisa exhaled slowly. That was the difference. Not technology. Not tactics. Memory. Not just data. Not just history. Memory with intention. With restraint. With choice. The ship reached the outer edge of the station's sensor envelope. For a moment, it seemed to hesitate. Not actually. Visually. It was gone. A brief distortion. A shift in space. And nothing remained. Just stars. Just darkness. Lisa stood there a while longer. Long enough for the corridor behind her to fill and empty again. Long enough for the moment to settle into something she could carry forward. Then she turned and walked back toward her work. Her report took 9 days. She wrote it slowly, carefully, not because she lacked information, because she understood this would matter. She included everything: the warning, the silence, the battle, the archive records, the pattern, the margin note. She did not exaggerate. She did not speculate beyond what the data allowed. She did not need to. The truth was enough. She titled it Preliminary Assessment, Human Civilizational Behavior and Regional Stability Implications. It was approved, filed, distributed. At first, it circulated quietly, among analysts, strategists, archivists. More broadly, delegates referenced it. Committees requested it. New arrivals to the council began receiving it as part of their orientation. Not officially, not at first, but consistently. Because once you understood, you needed others to understand. Not everything. Just enough. Lisa didn't know when it became standard. She only knew that one day, she saw a junior delegate reading it in the upper tier before a session. The same way she had once sat, watching, trying to make sense of something that didn't match the surface. She paused, watched him for a moment, then continued on. The council changed. Not dramatically, not publicly, but subtly. Expansion policies were reviewed more carefully. Unclaimed systems were approached with more caution. Certain regions, quietly, remained untouched. No declarations. No restrictions. Avoided. Over time, a pattern emerged. Unspoken. Unwritten. But understood. Some worlds were not to be tested. Not because they were known to be hostile. Not because they were known to be stronger. Because they were unknown. In the worst possible way. Lisa returned to the observation corridor weeks later. Not for a reason. Because the stars were the same. Unchanged. Unconcerned. She stood there looking out and thought about the question she had asked. Do humans know what they are? Rena's answer came back to her. Somewhat. Lisa considered that, then shook her head slightly. Because she wasn't sure that was true. Not fully. Not even for them. Because what they were was still unfolding. Still choosing. Still becoming. She rested her hand lightly against the glass. Solid. And for a moment she allowed herself to imagine what it must be like to carry 40,000 years of being watched, of being tested, of being underestimated, and to respond, not with expansion, not with domination, but with something far more difficult: control, restraint, memory. Lisa closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. The stars hadn't changed, but she had, and that was enough. Far beyond the station, far beyond the reach of its sensors, the human ship moved through deep space. Silent, unobserved, on a course no one had requested, and no one had been told. Inside, no one spoke of the council. No one spoke of the fleet. No one spoke of what had happened. Because for them, it wasn't new. It wasn't exceptional. It wasn't even unexpected. It was simply another moment in a much longer pattern. One they had learned long ago. One they continued to follow. Quietly, carefully, deliberately. Because they understood something the rest of the galaxy was only beginning to grasp. Not all power needs to be shown. Not all strength needs to be tested. And not all warnings are meant to be heard the first time.